To see that just let it churn for a few seconds, just make sure we've got it. Yes, if you go back to your Zoom, top left, 0 1. Right, good evening everyone. Thank you for your attendance on this incredibly hot evening. Hopefully we can all get home soon in front of a fan. But if we start with item 1, which is to receive and consider apologies for absence. I know we've had them from councillors Messent and Cosby. Councillor Faddis. Thank you. Right, if there are no others, we'll go on to item 2, to note declarations of members' interests. No indications. Move on to item 3, to confirm and sign the minutes of the Operations and Improvement Committee meeting held on 19th of May, which are on page 3 of your pack. If I could ask for a proposer in a second when you're ready. Thank you, Councillor Coyley. Got a seconder at all?
No, I think you were here.
Sorry.
I think you were last.
No, yes, I've seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Walton.
Sorry, Alan.
Everyone's satisfied with those? Can we show all in favour? Thank you very much. Item 4, public participation, a period not exceeding 15 minutes for members of the public to ask questions or submit comments. Have we had any?
Haven't received any.
Right. Councillor Faddis.
Possibly, make a statement really as a police for a councillor.
Oh, that's not going to get you the full 15 minutes.
I don't think I can talk for 15 minutes, Chair.
The floor is yours, Councillor Faddis.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would sincerely like to thank the committee for allowing us to improve the Lansdowne Park area. It wasn't my intention for the whole of the £100,000 to be allocated to one park. I felt a sense of guilt that other parks were missing out, but then again, I do know that the Lansdowne Park is desperately in need of some attention. So I really thank the committee for doing that. I've looked at the park strategy only briefly. I'm very much in favour of it. I'm very much in favour of Friends of the Parks groups. We have already had some interest in these in the area, in Friends of the Park, but also in the Queen Street area. So I would encourage any other members to speak to their residents, and if they want to engage with the residents to try to start a Friends of the Park group, it will be very welcome, because I think it's best if we do get the views of residents and children especially in this, and I'm just very much in favour of it. As I say, I did feel a little bit guilty, but if there is any money spare, I would hope that at least some of the other parks, which are looking at slightly tatty, to be painted a little bit. And I do hope that we can set up a Friends of the Park in Sydney as quickly as possible, and maybe add to this budget, and then other areas. We'll see what we've done, and they'll do the same next year. But just thank you, and it's a great strategy. I read through it quickly, but very much approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Faddis. As you mentioned, myself, yourself and others did attend a discussion with residents at the Lansdowne Road Park, and it went very well. Nobody got hurt, it was all positive. I think the residents just want to see some action, and hopefully we can give them that. So, Councillor Y.
Have we got a list of Friends of Parks groups, how do you find out this? So Lansdowne Rose has got one, actually.
I think they're wanting one. Whether they're, well, how far they've got with setting it up yet.
It's in Crewe West, isn't it? So,
It was Crewe East.
is it
Yeah.
There's one for Queen's Park.
There is, yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's one for Valley Park.
I'm not sure.
Friends of Valley Park.
Might worth speaking to Joe Cosby, because he'll be in
Yeah.
touch with the community group.
There was a group for Valley Park.
Yeah.
Don't know how much of it's still there, do you?
It's still partly active, but not most recently, but it's one of those groups that we need to refresh really and work with to develop some more support, but that will come through the project.
Well, can I ask a question about things? What are we expecting residents to do on this sort of thing?
It depends on the needs of that park, so part of that would be discussions with the friends about what they feel the issues might be in that particular park and gaining their suggestions and ideas. They could help to develop bids in order to look for funding for particular aspects and help to develop plans. But it's about having an engaged group, and they may want to do some volunteering and plant some trees or flower beds or
pull up weeds.
pull up weeds. Yes.
Because at the end of the day, on these play parks, it's the weeds which are doing the damage, the foam bases, because they haven't been weeded. And a lot of it needs a lot of weeding done around a lot of the parks.
That's well volunteered, Councillor Coyley.
Like I say, we're not paid work.
Go on, Councillor Faddis.
Take my full 15 minutes. If I could possibly come back, I visited the Langtree Park with a resident who used to work at some building organisation. And he actually said that we were putting rubber flooring on top of the original flooring, and that's why the weeds were coming through. So maybe it's actually looking at how we are doing that, and that's maybe addressing Cheshire East. So to find out if we are doing it the correct way. And he did show me a strip where the flooring had split.
Yeah.
And the weeds were coming up in between those gaps. So maybe he suggested pulling it all up and doing it again might be a cheaper alternative. Cheshire East may not think that's the best way.
Town Clerk would like to come in.
I think it's great that you raised that, and it's Cheshire East needs to look at this. I do need to be absolutely clear. I'm sorry to do this, be a bit pedantic. The funding for the play parks is an augmentation, is an improvement upon the provision that exists at base level. It remains incumbent on Cheshire East Council to maintain these parks and ensure it's done correctly, unless at a future date they are managed by someone else. So as a Cheshire East member, I'm sure you would anyway, encourage Cheshire East to find their means of best management on a day-to-day maintenance basis. And then any investment that comes from this, the parish council can only then build on that positive foundation. In fact, if I can ask that on it.
Of course.
Councillor Palin.
I just what Clark's just been saying about Cheshire East. If there is a friend of the group set up, maybe it's worth having a representative from Cheshire East there on that group, because one thing I'm worried about is once residents get involved, Cheshire East are very good at taking the back seat, and then it becomes someone else's problem. And then I don't know if it's right, if I'm right about the parks, is it answer that actually maintaining for them?
Yes.
And then, I think that they might do the same, like Councillor Corley said with the weeds. Once someone starts pulling those weeds up, answer won't do anything with them. They'll just, if you go look at Samuel Street Park, they literally cut the grass. They won't even strim around the fence line. It'll probably take them 20 minutes with the equipment they've got. But they don't do it because a resident probably did it in the past.
Yeah.
So they stopped doing it. So obviously it's just, Cheshire East needs to be involved, and obviously, like the clerk said, they need to be reminded that it is actually their responsibility, those basic things.
Yeah.
Getting them in place.
Encouraged.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, well, these things are all part of an ongoing conversation. Okay. Okay. Right, if we're all done there. You still got about 8 minutes, Councillor Faddis.
That's okay. Thank you though.
All right, we'll move on to item 5. So it's to note the year-to-date financial position for the Operations and Improvements Committee, which is on page 7.
So there's a little report there. There has been some expenditure. A lot of the budget is earmarked for activity this year. It's just not been invoiced yet. And hopefully the delivery plan that will be on a following item will start to explain some of those or request permission to spend some of those additional funds. Are there any questions? Are there any headings that you're unsure of or would like any explanation of?
Just give a couple of minutes for. We all happy with that? Okay, we'll move on. So item 6 is to consider and inform the draft park strategy, which is on page 9 of your packs.
Well, members, you asked me to draft up, asked us to draft up a parks and open spaces strategy, as the council has made a positive commitment to invest in particular play areas and bring as many as possible up to a standard we can be proud of. Not that there's anything necessarily wrong with them now, but it's not a bad thing to improve on. This draft strategy has been circulated for you to look at. It details out the open spaces for leisure in the town. The formal ones, there are obviously rough bits of ground and stuff, but they're not included in this stage. It tries to cover different aspects of what should be put forward for thoughts within a strategy, including the player equipment, investment, and some criteria for how that can be progressed and judged in the future. There is consideration associated with antisocial behaviour, how parks can be used. We must bear in mind that this council doesn't own or operate the parks at this point. However, it doesn't mean we shouldn't be in a position to advise and take a view on it, and that be informed by something that we have. And it seeks to identify the opportunities where the council can add value to these things. There is a statement there in resource. It's a commitment of this council, as I've said, to give somewhere in the region of £100,000 annual budget towards new play and leisure equipment. But equally be aware that there's nothing wrong with members being a resource in there. Your time engaging with the community, encourage them to create friends of groups, and even encourage them to take part in consultations. Informing what happens is a positive thing. And obviously there'll be officer time and resources associated. And at the end, it comes on to the priority actions as listed. No good having a strategy without a jobs list, because if you don't have a jobs list, it's just a document on the shelf. So that's that. There's also then 2 appendices, one for the green spaces list, which gives an idea of facilities, their current assessment as assessed by ANSWER, the contractor, and an indication of past investments gone into those sites. And so that's for information as we progress any future works. And then appendix 2 is a draft tree strategy. Bearing in mind the town council doesn't own many trees. There are trees and boundary finishes on allotments. They technically sit under allotment leases with the allotment societies. However, as a responsible authority, I think you'd be pragmatic to take a view of the capacity in the allotment societies management effectively, or whether we should take an oversight and try and have a rolling scheme of management of trees so we don't walk into any future problems. And those are documents in front of you, and I'm happy to answer any questions and cover anything you would like me to.
Councillor Y.
Thank you. I studied it carefully because there's been a big issue in Progress about the accusation of trees undermining roots, foundations of houses. A lot of the residents on a particular road are in bitter dispute with Cheshire East about the damage the trees seems to cause. But this doesn't mention anything about subsidence or root damage, does it?
No,
I can see, wisely so, I think, in that sense. But is there, do we know anything else that with what Cheshire East might do, or should we try and prompt that discussion?
that's, I don't know anything else about what Cheshire East might do. I think it's fine for members if that's what you mind us to do. And the issue of roots affecting properties not associated with the owner of that tree are set down in various bits of property legislation and land rights acts and things like that. So that's what the fallback would be. So if, let's say we had an estate with significant tree holdings on them, then we might as a council consider our risks and managing those risks and what we need to put in place to assess them. As we don't, it would be a little bit beyond expectation for us to go too far into it. However, if members are minded to challenge or approach Cheshire East on their plans, these issues, then that's fine. But I imagine it's a very litigious situation.
Yeah.
And if I
I'm sorry.
chip in, sorry. Looking at the tree strategy, there is good reason to have one, or Cheshire East primarily owns the land on which public trees and street trees are visible. And there have been instances over the last few years where councils haven't had a tree strategy and then adopted an approach perhaps to remove all the street trees because of issues such as encroachment on foundations, etc. And in Sheffield, that caused a major issue. So for this town council to be considering the importance of them and to have a strategy and to have some consideration maybe of where additional planting schemes might take place, for example, and where trees could be maintained better. That may help to mitigate some of those things that could be around the corner if things went the way they may do.
Can I present?
Councillor.
I want to make it perfectly clear that I'm all for planting trees along the roads because it makes such a difference to the temperature. So the last 3 days, if you've got a choice of walking down a tree lined street and not trees lined street, you're going to take a big detour to do that. And they're so valuable to us. But I mean, every year it gets hotter. We're reminded more warmth and water. You know, I wouldn't want us to convey the impression that we were anti-tree in any way. Quite the opposite. It's just the management of some of the bigger ones can be problematic.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments? That's recommended.
Well, if this is a draft strategy that members are comfortable with, and you're not wishing to make, or you can make as many members as you like, or we don't want to redraw, then if it's a strategy you want to see move forward, you will be asked then to recommend it to council, because council approves formal strategy or policy documents.
Thank you, Councillor Coyley. We need a seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Palin. All in favour? Thank you very much. That brings us on to item 7 on the agenda. We'll be coming on to the heritage strategy in a moment, but if I could point out to members that where it concerns Christchurch, there is some sensitive information around this subject, and I would like to suggest that we enter into part 2. So if I could get a proposer and a seconder for that, please. Thank you, Councillor White. Thank you, Councillor Walton. All in favour? Thank you. That brings us on to the heritage strategy.
So apologies from Vicky, our development officer, who can't be here this evening. I'm going to try to deliver this report on her behalf. You all have the document anyway. The report proposes revised terms of reference for the Heritage Group to assist in development of further heritage activity and budget planning for 2022 to 23. In background, the heritage strategy was written a couple of years ago now, and in that we were tasked with identifying and promoting Crewe's heritage. And the Heritage Group created a strategy which talked about priorities of recording, engaging with partners and promoting heritage in Crewe. So the strategy was adopted on the 29th of June 2021. The strategy proposes some initial activity for the priorities, and they are in the appendices. Within that, projects that have already been identified and approved, such as expenditure on Christchurch to enhance its appearance and create interest stories during the period of Christchurch development. £10,000 towards the heritage activity, such as a screen for the market hall and the blue plaques, etc. And also contribution which would probably take place later next year towards value book to create an interpretation trail. There's also salary in there for the Heritage Development Officer. So now we have a Heritage Officer in place. The terms of reference have been reviewed and they're included in the appendix for you to approve, and that will provide a new way of working for the Heritage Working Group. And then following that, they would like to focus on some key areas. So there's some projects for consideration for delivery with other officers at the moment, such as a programme of evaluation of heritage assets and what's important to people of Crewe. Development of an audience insight, including community advisory panels. So this would take the form of something like a heritage forum, and that's something that they're looking to develop. And then a programme of festival and events which are rooted in the history and heritage of the town. So through that, the Heritage Officer and the working group will help to advise the events committee and the events officer on what they're developing. We'll look to include heritage in other aspects of the town council's work, and a programme of digital engagement. So the strategy looks to strengthen our offering to the community. We refer to strategy, heritage strategy, and the community plan. It also connects there, as it was identified as important to the community through that process. And also the town investment plan, which is obviously looking to regenerate Crewe and look for wider sources of funding. Considerations sought today are to approve the adoption of the revised terms of reference, which you have in your appendix, for a heritage group, and to receive a heritage delivery plan for 2022-23 alongside proposals for medium and long-term projects at the November committee meeting. So they will produce a report for you for November.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Coyle.
I understand the heritage group.
Yes.
What's that mean?
So it was originally formed as a heritage working group with nominated members. That included a member of the town council and local history experts, if you like, who've written about the history of Crewe or are very keen on the recording of Crewe's heritage. Councillor Wise is on that group currently. We have a representative from the college, local history societies, etc. The difficulty with the working group is in the way it's formed and the way it needs to report, and they would like to, the point of this is to make that a little bit easier for them to go out and engage with the community, and ensure that anything that they do has got community support, and they bring back to committee for approval. They don't operate autonomously, it's all approved by committee. But it just gives them a bit of freedom to work in a slightly different way without having to report absolutely everything, their discussion, but basically come back with key decisions and action. That's that. Do you agree with that?
Yeah,
So,
yes, I think one or two sound quite new to me.
Yeah.
I think is a the challenge is to access. There's a bigger pool of historical knowledge out there that we don't engage with, and I think it's and like the great thing about history, it always forces an argument. Why was the Queen's Park built? There's always going to be a debate about that. Yeah, it'd be good to have a formal structure to it.
Any other questions or comments? I'll just reiterate the considerations then is to approve the adoption of the revised terms of reference for the Heritage Group and to receive a Heritage Delivery Plan for 2022-23 alongside proposals for medium and long-term projects at the November 2021 O&I. If I can get a proposer and a seconder for those. Thank you, Councillor Palin. Thank you, Councillor Walton. All in favour? Thank you very much. That brings us to item 8 on the agenda, which is to receive updates and consider matters related to the delivery plan. For anyone that's got it, this is page 39 of your pack.
Thank you. So this puts a number of activities in one report to try to push things along more quickly for you. So within the appendix, you have the delivery plan as is with the budget allocations. Within that, we have a heading for Regeneration Projects. In that, there's a budget applied of, there are lots of regeneration activities, but this one is called Regeneration Projects. And that was originally allocated within the delivery plan to a shop window scheme and to additional activity, which was suggested as training, possibly for retailers. In the current situation, the town centre is in need of some improvement visually while development work takes place. There are other activities underway, but the suggestion is that to improve the shop window funds might be a good way of applying all of the funding at this point, and hold back on offering training to retailers, etc., as they are in a position at the moment of just trying to get back into their businesses. And there are other large pots of money and training available to businesses through organisations such as the LEP and Growth Hub. An offer has been made by a local business to assist to get this project underway. They have absolutely no interest in continuing the project, but just to help to demonstrate with one shop window, they've offered to fund the printing and installation of some vinyls in one window. The suggestion is to use the crew branding, which has been adopted by the Town Council to help with this visually. And this would give an opportunity to cross-pollinate, as we've talked about with Heritage, perhaps to use a window to talk about something in Cruise history or to highlight other activities. And therefore, on this part of the report, I'm asking for consideration to enable the full spend of £5,000 allocated to regeneration to be applied to the shop window improvement scheme. Just moving on from that is an update on the play area improvements. And as members will be aware, £100,000 has been allocated to Lansdowne Road. So we're in the process at the moment of engagement, and the community engagement manager has started those conversations and forms for the community to fill in to help to advise on the best equipment to install there. Feedback from that consultation will then be delivered to ANSA, and then designs for appropriate proposals will be requested with potential suppliers within ANSA's procurement framework. So these are already approved suppliers who can come up with designs, and those will then go back to the community so they can give their view. And then once those results have come back, we can share them and agree on a proposed scheme. So we'll come back to Town Council for some approval of the final designs. And we anticipate installation. Originally, we were hoping that would be by autumn 2021, but it looks, looking at ANSA's timetable, that could be early next year. There will be some, I think there are some limitations really on the sort of materials available and supplier lead times, and that's not limited purely to play area equipment, but across the board. So that's your update on the play areas. Do you have any questions on that?
Councillor Y.
I think I mentioned it last time about the importance of engaging young children in the design aspect of these things, and getting us a jewel of friends group. We'll do that now until September. I think schools would respond well to it if we had the. It takes a bit of time, but I'd be willing to approach it through schools.
Thank you. So I'll have that conversation with Hannah, the engagement officer, because I'm sure she'd welcome support and aspects of it. Thank you very much. So shall I move on to the next part? Thank you. So in terms of public realm and the Lyceum Square improvements, you remember at the last meeting recommending to council investments in the Lyceum Square project to the value of £64,000. So further discussions have been had about that and meeting the conditions of that expenditure, and the clerks sent a letter to Cheshire East requesting an agreement response, haven't you?
Yeah.
So we're just awaiting that. In addition, there have been, just to make you aware, some other discussions broached about the future management of Lyceum Square, because essentially what's being developed now is a venue, for lack of any other description. So it's a public space that can be used for lots of events, but there will also be a lot of equipment that needs to be managed and maintained, and programming to be done, consideration of costs of maintenance, planting schemes, etc. So Cheshire East to go through a process of identifying what those needs are at the moment and the costs allocated, enter into conversation with the town council, because obviously there are certain things that the town council currently undertakes that relate to that, or they have an interest in, such as access to equipment for events, or indeed perhaps managing programmes. So we will keep you updated on that discussion, and at some point there may be proposals coming back to members to consider future agreements on that basis.
I'll ask the question.
Councillor White.
So you talked about a management process of that space.
Yes.
Can I just really make a point that it still remains a public space? I see too many public spaces have been taken over by private management groups, and then gradually they turn into their own policing force, and they no longer come up. And so it's like, I want to make very clear that these do remain public spaces, and they're not going to be fencing off things.
Yeah, but then that's their consideration. That's a good point. I mean, it has been designed and funded as a public space.
Yeah.
Obviously, there will be elements within that design, particular areas like a container might be occupied by an artist, and they need that to be secure and workable. But in terms of the overall space, there's no intention to change that, but definitely a consideration we can convey and ensure.
Thank you.
Councillor Walton.
Yeah, all I wanted to know really, is it still, you're not allowed to park there, it's a no parking space.
That's right.
But to be separate cars there this afternoon, I don't know who it belongs to, but we must bring back 3 or 4 them and try to see square park.
I think that is a bit of an ongoing issue. I mean, the road is still,
It's like somebody asked me, they said, oh, can you park it now? I said, we don't know what that's
yeah, it's still supposed to be.
It's still not supposed to.
But that's being policed by Cheshire East Council. So,
Yeah, because I just said that I just didn't know. Thanks.
thank you. Ready for questions?
It's mainly for now, but I noticed that on the 15th of this month, the government has opened up this funding bid for up to £250,000 match funding for community groups to take over empty derelict shops and stuff like that. Have we had any conversation with anybody about that?
We're aware of it.
Right.
We haven't had a chance to look at it in detail, but it's definitely on our horizon to do that.
Because the bids are open now. I just think
Yeah.
it'd be great. There must be so many groups that with a lot of support would do that.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So we'll make ourselves familiar with what that is. I know there are some other organisations that indeed Cheshire is also aware of it. So I think people are trying to get that out where they know there might be some relevance for an organisation to apply for it, and certainly look at it too. The next section of this report talks about promotion and animation funding. You might recall, well, within the delivery plan that we've identified some potential areas to spend animation funding. Now, some of that funding was initially going to be spent on some animation around the Lyceum Square or Market Square, perhaps working with an organisation such as Cat Radio. Cat Radio have actually received some funding from the events committee to do that work. So at this point, we do have some excess, well, not excess funds, but funds unaccounted for. We have a proposal for 3 counties open arts display, and this has been managed by Keele University, and it's been an open competition for competitors from Cheshire, Staffordshire, and I think Derbyshire to apply. And there'll be an exhibition using some prefabricated illuminated cubes. So they're freestanding items, and the art entries will be exhibited, and that'll go on tour from the autumn. So we have an opportunity to bring those to Crewe for a period of time, sometime in the new year, not agreed yet. The cost of that would be £1,920, and I would ask if members would consider that we can allocate some of our animation funding to that. The advantages being that it brings something of interest to the town centre. It's not an event, it's something that people can attend in their own time, so we're not encouraging gatherings, and it's something that made a little bit inspirational for people to see some art in the town. In addition to that, as we approach Christmas, we haven't got selected use from the funds that we're going to be allocated to bring in the radio station in. On that basis, I would ask if we can look at that expenditure before next committee meeting in November, and to give me permission, if you like, authority to start finding an alternative use for that, creating some animation around the town that can connect with the Christmas programme and the activity and events that's being organised at that point, which I wouldn't have time to come back to members to make that decision a bit later in the year.
For our YouTube follower, can you define animation for me?
Yeah, the point of animation came from when we originally had one committee covering events and all sorts of other regeneration activities. So events specifically is that animation can cover anything which just helps to add interest to the town, whether it be some stilt walkers or to bring it to life. Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
He's not listening.
And then the final element of this report is an update on the Cleaner Crew project. So the Town Council has been working with Cheshire East Council and ANSA to improve the cleanliness of the streets in Crewe, as you're well aware. And there has been a pilot, well, still is a pilot project called Cleaner Crew, which is underway, and some of our members are more than aware as they're taking part in getting involved in working with resident groups and cleaning up alleyways, etc. To support that project, members agreed to support the cost of an additional enforcement officer, so to give some teeth after any education and engagement works underway to enforce that maintenance of the clean streets. So that discussion has been had, and the council's now given approval to enter into that funding agreement with Cheshire East for provision of an enforcement officer, and final terms of agreement are being organised at this moment.
You did the bid feasibility.
You didn't. Sorry, I missed one. Final update is on the bid feasibility. So town centre bid feasibility, which is item 14 on your Appendix A. And the purpose of this is to allocate funds to procure a supplier to undertake a feasibility study for development of a business improvement district. If you're not fully up to speed with bids, it is a statutory process to establish a bid, and it involves a development plan being put forward to local stakeholders who would if in agreement, pay an additional levy on their rates. So it's quite an involved process and requires some consideration in terms of what an additional levy might raise, what's the geographic area that the bid might be organised in, and what sort of support there would be for a bid in that area. It also requires some inquiry into what sort of priorities those bid levy payers would consider if they were going to support this. That will take quite a deal of focused work and lots of calculations and engagement with local businesses. So members agreed to allocate funds to procure that supplier, and the clerk has sent out a request for expressions of interest. We've received 5 expressions of interest and are in the process of scoring those expressions, and we'll be coming back with a proposal to appoint a supplier.
No, we'll just go
We
to
don't
points.
need it, we'll just go ahead.
Go to point to carry the process on more readily.
The benefits of this whole process are that it starts to open up those discussions and gives us that extra resource, because there are a lot of businesses in the group to talk to. So to have an organisation taking control of that for some period and coming back with a substantial report gives us some really good feedback on their needs for the town centre too.
Any questions or comments? Okay, if we take a little slight back step, then we've got considerations under item 8.1 to approve progression of the project approaching relevant town centre property owners, to note the offer of additional support which will be accepted subject to final detail being approved by the clerk, to delegate authority to the regeneration manager to procure suitable suppliers within procurement requirements, and to delegate authority to the regeneration manager to spend up to the value of £5,000 on this project. If I could get asked for a proposer and a seconder.
So,
Thank you, Councillor Bailey.
isn't too late to ask for application, it's just that we did say last meeting that there would be a strong preference for local artists. Is that within the brief?
Yes.
Correct, okay, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. All in favour? Thank you. And then under item 8.4, we've got some considerations, which is to approve expenditure of up to £2,000 to support installation of art display cubes temporarily in the town centre, and to delegate allocation of further animation funds within agreed budgets to secure COVID-safe activities where required before the next committee meeting in November. Activities to be agreed with the chair of committee, clerk and regeneration officer. If I can have a proposer and a seconder for those. Thank you, Councillor Palin. Thank you, Councillor White. All in favour? Thank you very much. That brings us to item 9 on the agenda, which is to consider matters related to the work of the Crew Rangers, which is page 55 of your packs, and I will turn over to the town clerk.
Hello. Yeah. The Crew Town Rangers are the report covers this in more detail. Basically, the town council's traditional municipal service delivery, direct service delivery to the community. Seeking to improve and maintain the public realm. They do a range of tasks which is listed in the report, and the opportunity to take on tasks and how they addressed is in there as well. The consideration I think members should start placing upon themselves is the range of service as it stands now. Is that how you want it to stand? How we would see it in the future is direct service delivery of traditional municipal services in public realm, something that is a positive thing we should be investing in, or we should be doing something else. It's my conclusion, which is obviously long democratic and down to you, that the range of services is key and visible direct service delivering Crew. It's valued by the vast majority of people who come into contact with it, I'm aware of. It's current means of centralised coordination. Effectively, all requests for work come into the office, and they are issue to the team in a coordinated bundle effectively rather than getting piecemeal. Allows the rangers to be free to go about work in a sensible order. It's pointed out in the report that if you recall, we have a thing called a medium-term financial plan. That's us planning for the future to ensure we understand where the funding is going on a longer term than just year by year. And in that medium-term financial plan that's adopted by council, there is provision in it for a growth in that service if numbers are so minor to go down that road. And later on, we look at the budget and that reflects the medium-term financial plan. So consideration of how you see that going. It's currently delivered through a commission service. So effectively, we commission Answer to employ 3 town rangers and deliver them through their policies effectively. The benefits of that are we're a small council. We have nowhere to put vans and trailers and machinery. We have no welfare facilities for people working in the public realm. We have nowhere to wash vans, and we have no secure storage. Equally, we are not of capacity at this stage for significant health and safety considerations, cost aspects associated with chemicals, and various different other aspects of machine maintenance and procurement. So that's why it's that way. However, there comes a point where paying Answer to deliver it becomes less cost efficient. So as you reach a point with a certain number of rangers, the consideration should be taken as to what point should that become direct management, like internal. And there's an appendix that shows the cost comparators at the point where 4 ranges effectively becomes the break point when there should be direct managed for the sake of cost and operational. Building the service will bring in the consideration of there'll be some day-to-day practical supervision. The team needs someone to look to at each job to say what's the priority to get on. So and that's within that medium-term financial plan and sits within all express budgets. And the positives are building a service in terms of great continuity of planned activities as well as responsive maintenance. And it's a clear understanding of the ambitions for local direct service delivery of this nature, and we need that. So realistically, in my report, what I'm asking you to consider, and I'm going to read it out because I haven't memorised it, and in fact I wrote it a while ago, so I've forgotten most of it. Dennis is it. With the available budget in the medium-term financial plan, the service can accommodate an additional team member. As the service reaches its level, consideration of the future scale of the service is required to ensure best efficacy and efficiency. And so you're asked to consider what scale and ambition does this committee and council by extension when you make a recommendation. How for the future of local municipal direct service delivery, how will this committee inform the development of that strategy? So I'm not asking you to say what you want today. I'm asking you to start thinking about what you want in a structured way so that we know which direction we're going. The current operating model understood task fulfills current expectations. The allocation of medium-term financial plan budget figures seeks to create a supervisory coordinating senior ranger role, and that the viability of direct employment of ranger service needs to be explored.
Anybody have any questions or comments? Councillor White?
I think you know, Clark's right. It's a big job, but we need to think about it really, really carefully. We also need to think, will we be able to match Answer's skill, resources, and expertise in managing it? Because it's an out there service, isn't it? Which will need some sort of daily management. So yeah, it's a big decision to make.
Well, yeah, that's exactly why I'm not asking to answer that. But I am asking you to start that consideration. What is your ambition for the service? Is it at the point you feel is adequate and appropriate for the town? Does a town scale warrant a larger provision? Is it a service that is valued by the community that the service might seek to have greater provision? It's those. If it's not, then that's fine. You keep it as it is. When it comes to direct management, the processes will be adopted directly, and you have provision within them. But it does require much more consideration. But if we don't start consideration today, then that's pushing it down the road, and it needs to be understood what you want to see out of this. So you start the process of discussion and consideration, and that can lead somewhere or not. That's entirely down to you as members of the direct. I'm just asking you to consider it so we know where we want to go. And I'll have to put my cards in. I'm entirely supportive of direct service delivery and the Ranger service being that extension. I think a town scale of crew with effectively 70,000 people serving 140 something thousand in close proximity. Asked to be have a public road cleansing on 3 ranges and 2 vans is a bit of a stretch, and they do a huge amount of work and work extremely effectively and positively, and they constantly surprising how much you do get. But I believe it's impractical to expect them to have any significant impact on the broader issues in the town in terms of public road maintenance without considering whether that's something we want to invest in.
Councillor Coyley and then Councillor White.
Well, that's a moral argument, Councillor Coyley, and I can't argue with the moral argument. I prefer, it's not meant to be constant anyway, it might be a little bit horrible, I'm sorry. I prefer to work in the pragmatic rather than the academic. And the pragmatic is the Cheshire East contract for this service goes to answer and set as it is. And that's not a criticism, that's just the way it is. So any increase in that provision would require Cheshire East to find fundings for a non-statutory service, which wouldn't be their priority, and increase that provision. So if members are happy with the way the town is maintained under 3 ranges and an answer contract through Cheshire East, then there is no discussion about it. You're exactly right, leave it as it is. If members feel that that could be improved, I would advise that you consider how you can make a positive impact on that, because I can't realistically see how Cheshire East could prioritise non-statutory funding over statutory funding.
Councillor White.
That was my question. Yeah, it's would we need another? We need to have a building as well, as opposed to.
Yeah, there are units available, and they will be negotiated very favourably through Cheshire East assets because they already pre-exist. The capacity in the town exists; it doesn't exist within the town council. So it's about accessing that capacity in an appropriate way and using it for that purpose. There is capacity in the town in Cheshire East works yards is the old way of calling it, and what they're really called now. And it would be a seat to be able to access them in favourable terms. And I would hope our strategic partners in the bigger building down the road would look favourably on that positive intent of this council to add value to the community.
So could I'd like a lot more detail. So could I propose that if when you've got time, put a full proposal with the elements of the costs all out, less, because I think what we're thinking about it, and some time on
You're the members, it's entirely up to you what you want to do.
it's my proposal.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Coyley. Everyone in favour of that? Yes. Right, thank you. Right. You're on that. Everyone's happy. We'll go on to item 10. That's fine. Thank you for attending, Councillor Palin. Right, as I say, that brings us to item 10, which is to receive an update on the projects to apply decorative finishes to crew hoardings, an update on suppliers and activity to take local images for inclusion, which is page 63 of your packs.
Thank you. The members will remember accepting the proposal to receive up to £25,000 from Cheshire East Council and to hold a tender for supply of decorative finishes to the hoardings, which are around the old Royal Arcade site. And that we undertook that process a couple of months ago, and a supplier was chosen through that process, which happens to be a local company, and they are going to supply 307 linear meters of printed material, which basically covers an area from the top of Victoria Street, or just around the corner. You can imagine hoardings is sort of roughly a square, all the way around to Delamere Street, and all those fronts will be covered in decorative finish to a high quality material, which is fairly vandal resistant and cleanable, as much as you can guarantee that can be, and they will also maintain that fence. So as the next stage to that process, we wanted to include in it some provision for public art to be added. So they are going to create some areas for that, and they're also going to take images, photographs to include in the designs. You'll be familiar with the crew branding, which is going to be the basis of those designs. And if you look in the appendix, you'll see that there are photographs of people in those images with the strap lines about recreate, rebuild, crew works, those types of phrases. So we'd like to include real people rather than models. On that basis, we've engaged Design Office to go out and take photographs of real people with their permission, all duly signed up that they're going to see themselves in great big hoardings and other images used in the crew branding. So that's process is taking place at the moment. Also incorporated into it will be viewing spaces, we hope subject to some clarification from Bowman Kirkland. So there should be some spaces where you should be able to see through to what's actually going on the other side of the hoardings. And also space for what's on sort of information, which could include the local events and the programme of activity in Lyceum Square, whatever is happening in town. And also a suggestion from the supplier was to put in a find the hidden character. So they're going to produce some removable vinyls and they'll put them around the hoardings so people can bring their children along, perhaps to go and find the little aliens or whatever characters are hidden around the hoardings, just as a bit of fun. So we shared the initial draft designs. I'm waiting for the next set of designs, and I will share them with members when we've got something a bit more to show you, and hopefully we'll be then including the nice images of crew people. So that's where we stand at the moment, and you should be seeing these designs coming to life, I would think now, mid-September, by the time we finish this process.
Councillor Coyley.
Yeah, can I just ask a question on the, what did you call it, free art space?
Yeah, a public art space. So that will be managed by Cheshire East Council's team working with the Cultural Forum, and they'll give out the opportunity for local artists to design something. It may be printed, or it might be fixed, it might be some other material, but that will then, or poetry, and that'll get fixed that area, become a changing display.
Okay.
Councillor Wise.
I like the idea of the viewing slots. Can I recommend that there's lots of those at different heights as well? Because I can imagine that schools will be doing projects on the new build, primary schools. I've seen them many times where they're that high and no child on their own actually see.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on that one? You got anything else you want to add?
I don't think so.
We'll move on to item 11 then, which is to discuss budget requirements for 2022-23, which is page 65 of the pack.
For this.
Budget was circulated in the papers. It reflects directly the medium-term financial plan. If you want to go line by line, we have the queries on it. I'm sure they can be answered.
Stunned silence.
Because it's an exciting topic.
Just wondering if there's anything that we can draw your attention to.
Please do break the silence.
Just one issue that you might want to pay a little bit of attention to is heritage and heritage support. What we have there is really the status quo. There's no inflationary increase in that. There are a few elements to that. So you've got the Heritage Working Group, an activity that will get generated through that working group and their collaboration with other groups. But you've also got heritage support, which essentially at the moment is the match funding for employment of a heritage officer in the work on Christchurch. That might be an area that you want to consider adding some resource to, as Vicky's work will evolve over the next 12 months. So that might be an area that you might want to think about increasing, depending on how much you wanted to achieve in that time.
Any other questions or comments?
Bit of clarification, the lighting at the bottom.
Yeah.
That isn't the Christmas lighting, is it? That's.
No, it's enhancements. So this year's budget and last year's, the earmarked funds from last year, for example, are going to be applied to Lyceum Square improvements. Next year, there may be another area of the town that we'd like to enhance with some lighting. So as businesses start to open up on Victoria Street, for example, you might want to add some lighting there or do some enhancements on Market Square. But you'll have the option to decide.
It's effectively festoon or decorative tree lighting that's installed all year round. And in that, it just makes the evening economy more enhanced, or enhanced as I should phrase. And equally, it extends the positive trading day in the darker months as well, when the lights are on at 3, 4 o'clock, for example.
Yeah.
And they're used all around the country now. They're very positive installation. Just adds a bit of value to the aesthetic of the town centre. There's decorative lighting.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? No? Yeah, that's you. Obviously, this is just to inform the discussion basically, and get us all thinking, because it's not too far away now that we will be looking to get into the budget setting process. You'll have all seen before that there is an agreed timetable on issuing the budget, so there will be plenty of opportunities for members and committees to feed in. So by all means, take this away, have a look at the numbers, and if you've got any questions or comments that you do come up with, I'm sure the Regeneration Manager and the clerk would be happy to answer them. Okay. As per the earlier resolution, the committee under section 1 of the Public Bodies Admissions to Meetings Act 1960 will now exclude the public and representatives of the press from the meeting during the consideration of item 7, which is the Christchurch development, on the grounds that matters contain sensitive information and by reason of the confidential nature of the business being transacted.